Hi, this is Dr. Frank with the Church of Rational Truth. This week we're going to talk about being the bigger person, basically being able to let go or at least act more humanely when someone has wronged you or when you think something unfair has happened. This topic for me is very personal. In my past, I absolutely have people who, in my opinion, have owed me quite a bit. Many times it's something financial, like, for example, I've had a couple of business transactions that have gone very poorly where I believe someone has ended up owing me tens of thousands of dollars, and yet I am left with very little legal or other recourse, and then I have to kind of just eat my losses and be stuck with it. This happens all the time, maybe not to that extent, but I'm sure everyone in their life has had some possible situation where they feel like they have been wronged, they have been screwed over, and they have little to no recourse. And then we have to decide what we're going to do about that. And of course, like everything in this, it comes down to coping mechanisms. And the question is, how are you going to handle that? Are you going to sit and stew? Are you going to get angry? Are you going to do something? Are you going to resort to violence or other childish ways of trying to get back at the person? Now, us being emotional creatures, it's very easy to want to lash out or, pardon this phrase, go postal and try to seek some sort of vigilante justice or to strike back at the person who has wronged you. Obviously, I've had feelings like that before in the past, but that is something that we have to try to reduce and prevent ourselves from doing, because do we really want to live in a world where people solve their problems through violence? Especially when they're civil problems, non-violent problems. If I have someone who, like, let's say a neighbor that's annoying me, or a land dispute, I might end up having to be hurt, but I don't think that a good way of solving that in the vast majority of cases is through violence or other childish tactics, or very petty or vengeful tactics. We should try to solve things civilly, and at some point, we have to accept that life is not fair. That is a very difficult concept. We all want justice, and I try to push for justice in these cases as much as I can, but there's many situations where we are not able to get justice. For example, in South Carolina, we have a big problem where if someone has zero assets and you sue them in civil court, well, if they have nothing that can be taken from them, they are judgment proof. They cannot have any negatives really happen to them. Now, they obviously can't get rich, because if they start getting money, you could actually try to take that away. But if the person is already going to be living a life of near poverty or poverty where they don't get a certain amount of assets ever, depending on, the situation, is if they don't have a house more than $25,000, if they don't have more than one vehicle, if they don't have jewelry or personal assets over a couple $1,000s, you have zero recourse, and they could owe you $1,000,000, they could owe you $5,000, and you can't do anything. You can't collect on it, you can't have them go to prison, you can't have their taxes garnished, you can't have their wages garnished. That person gets off scot-free and can end up, taking quite a bit from you. That is a rough situation, and a lot of times we have to kind of swallow our pride, accept that for a fact, and then live with it. It's not easy, it's not happy, no one enjoys that situation, but sometimes we are given a certain judicial system and we can't go above or beyond that. We have to accept that. That doesn't mean that we have to do nothing. We don't have to just, okay, sit there and take it and just every time someone's going to try to screw us over, just, well, turn the other cheek, so to speak, and let them take advantage. But you can use that to change how you do business, who you do business with. A lot of times we don't have a good idea of who we're doing business with, but hopefully these things can teach us, hey, let's do some background research. Let's see, does someone have some way to vouch for this person? Does this person actually have assets that can be have a lien against them, or some way of recompensing ourselves? Or even with future business dealings, knowing that this is a possibility. I mean, now in the future, I've learned that if I'm doing business with someone, if they don't have assets or some other way to legally get recourse, there's a good chance of me getting potentially very hurt in this business dealing, because I many times will not have a way of getting back what I believe is owed to me, even with a judgment. So the important thing is to understand this, to be able to cope, and to not go towards petty violence or anger. This is sort of on the side of turning the other cheek, but I would say it's turning the other cheek with modifications or with learning or growing from it. It doesn't mean that you have to necessarily completely forgive the person. I think that if someone has harmed you in the past, there's a difference between forgiving and forgetting. You can kind of forgive and say, okay, well, I'm not going to hold a personal grudge or personal anger, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to try to look for justice and change how you act towards that person. If I have someone who has hurt me in the past and made no effort to make the debt better or to improve the relations, I'm certainly going to keep that in mind for any future dealings with that person. I've got business relationships that are commonly very strained, and that does affect how I'm going to do business with them in the future. But a lot of times you have to say, well, we're still going to keep this civil, and it's just going to affect my future dealings with them, but I'm not going to try to be petty. I'm not going to try to get back at them in dumb ways. And we really have to try not to get into mudslinging, violence, or really uncivilized means of acting, because if we start going down that road, everybody becomes uncivilized. We don't improve ourselves as a civilization. We don't get rid of this to begin with. And if anything, we should focus more on actually good ways of attaining justice and appropriate responses for when someone has wronged us. It's really more of a systemic issue at some point, and it's one of those things where you can either be brought down to that person's level and be just as morally unjustified as they are by acting childishly back, or you can grow, be the bigger person, and say, what, life is not fair, I got hurt this time, we will learn, we will take our chops, and we will move on and not let us destroy ourselves from this. I've seen many people in the past where something unfair has happened to them, and then it has led to their almost complete destruction because they can't move on, they can't get over it, they're still stuck on this unfair thing that happened to them. Well, sadly, most people who have gone through life have had unfair things happen to them, and honestly, it's probably going to happen again to most people. I'm sure in my future unfair things will happen to me, but you can't dwell on it, you can't get stuck on it. You make the few changes that you can do, you push for political change, but sometimes we have to just accept that life is not fair and we have to move on, and it's better to move on and try to improve ourselves and keep to our business than to get stuck on something and then add even more negative to an already bad situation, because then, well, you're not even helping yourself at that point. You are, hurting yourself to possibly hurt another, and that's not really a good way to live or to thrive as a person. Sometimes you have to let go and then just work on thriving yourself and let the other person be at the wayside. So that's it for this lecture. The results for voting is the passive income will be going towards the church and library fund, so that will be added into that. And then next week we'll have another lecture. Once again, this is Dr. Frank with the Church of Rational Truth. Thank you so much for watching. You have a great day. Bye-bye.